human voice. It's the instrument we all play. It's the most powerful sound in the world, probably. It's the only one that can start a war or say, I love you. And yet many people have the experience that when they speak, people don't listen to them. Why is that? How can we speak powerfully to make change in the world?
Hello everyone, and welcome to the second last installment of Ryerson's podcast. That was Julian Treasure on how to speak so that people want to listen. A great TED Talk that I strongly recommend. My name is Leo, and for the next little while, I will guide you through what I believe to be some of the best ways to give a successful presentation in English. I will, however, focus on two important techniques that will surely help you deliver better presentations. I'm sure that many of you were asked or often asked to give presentations on a very specific topic when you're in school. I have, and guess what? I was terrified. I never really liked presenting in school. Why? Fear of public speaking, you may say? I don't know. I just wasn't trained to do that. Presentations are also common in business contexts. Yet, regardless of age, many people find this challenge nerve-wracking, including you. What I really hope this podcast will do is give you the confidence to speak in public, learn how to get started, engage your audience, keep your listeners involved, and last but not least, how to use your voice effectively. Throughout this podcast, I will be referring to some techniques that I've learned from this amazing book written in 1996 by a man named Mark Powell. The book is called Presenting in English, and it really helped me to master presentation skills. And a lot of the content that I will be dealing with in our podcast today was inspired and adapted from this book. Unfortunately, the book is out of print, but you can ask me and I can share my copy with you. So, what makes a good presentation? Without exception, all good presenters have one thing in common: enthusiasm, both for their subject and for the business of presenting it. Enthusiasm is infectious. Audiences can help but be affected by it. They know that if it matters to them, it will matter to their audience. Many things contribute to the success of a presentation: a clear structure, a good sense of timing, imaginative use of visual aids, the ability to make people laugh and think. But above and beyond all of these is enthusiasm. Apart from enthusiasm, a good opening and closing are also very important. Start strong. First impressions are powerful. Here's what Mark Powell, my presentation guru, has to say about openings and closing.
To give a successful presentation, they say you need to have a good beginning, a good ending, and keep them close together. And sure enough, research shows that audiences remember the first and last few minutes of a presentation long after they've forgotten most of what was said in the middle. Psychologists call this the primacy-recency effect. But you might prefer to think of your opener and your close as two bookends holding up your talk. To do their job, they both need to be strong. Now, starting off by saying good morning, introducing yourself, thanking your audience for coming, apologizing for a small technical problem with your audio visuals, and asking if people can hear you at the back is clearly not a strong opening. But neither is this.
I want to talk to you today about the kind of world we, in the business community, are passing on to the next generation.
What's wrong with it? It's short, direct, and boring. Let's see how it might have sounded.
Environmental degradation, a declining economy, crippling taxes, chronic diseases, a life expectancy shorter than that of their parents, and $30,000 of debt for every man, woman, and child. This is the nightmare world we're passing on to our kids.
Now that's a good...
So, based on what Mr. Powell has just said, the first 3 minutes of a presentation are the most important according to communication experts. Believe it, the audience wants to like you, and they will give you a few minutes at the beginning to engage them. Don't miss that opportunity. Most presenters fail here because they ramble on too long about unimportant things. So, how do we start strong? How do we have an effective opening? A lot of these experts often refer to hooks, which are basically simple techniques for getting the immediate attention of the audience. Remember, a good start makes you feel more confident. So here's how the experts suggest you hook your audience. You can tell them a story, you can show them a video, you can present them with a belief statement or an intriguing structure to your presentation. Perhaps you could use a little bit of your humor, or ask them a rhetorical question, or give them a provocative statement, or shock and surprise them. These are all great hooks. I will, however, focus on 3 of them. Number 1, give them a problem to think about. Number 2, give them some amazing facts. And finally, give them a story or personal anecdote. Alright, we've dealt with a lot of the theoretical aspects of doing a presentation. We've talked about how to become a good presenter, we've watched a couple of videos. Now we're going to get down to brass tacks and we're going to be looking at language, because a good presentation is not only theory but also the language in which you use when delivering your presentation. So what we're going to be doing this activity right now in which you have to recognize openers. So you will see an opener on the screen and you're going to have to sort them out into 3 categories. The first one being the problem technique. Remember, the one in which you give them something to think about. The second one is the amazing facts technique. And the third one, a personal story or telling an anecdote type of technique. So grab a piece of paper, a pen or pencil, and you will have about 10 to 15 seconds to decide whether the opener is a problem technique, an amazing facts technique, or a personal story. You ready? Here we go. So here we have, did you know that Japanese companies spend an average of $40 billion a year entertaining their clients? $40 billion, that's right. You know, that's 4 times more than the entire GDP of Bulgaria. You could buy General Motors for the same money. What is that? Well, if you guessed amazing fact, you were right. Let's move on to the next one. Suppose your advertising budget was cut by 99% tomorrow. How would you go about promoting your product? What do you think this one is? Amazing fact? Problem? Personal anecdote? Ta-da! It's a problem. Look at the language here. Suppose. So you're giving them a problem here. You're telling them that you've cut their budget. So how would they react? How would they still promote their product? Alright, moving on to the next one. And this is an interesting one. According to a recent study, by 2050, only 1 in every 4 people in Western Europe will be going to work, and 2 will be old age pensioners. What do you think this one is? It's interesting to look at this here, according to a recent study. If you think a little bit about it, you will realize this is an amazing fact, because the information that follows this chunk here is actually something that surprises your audience. Okay? Moving on. When I think about creativity, I'm reminded of the man who invented the microwave oven. He spent years messing around with radar transmitters, and then noticed the chocolate in his pocket was starting to melt. What do you think about this one? It's interesting to actually notice the language here. When I think about something, a noun, an ing, a gerund, I am reminded of something. And when you describe that, that is a story. You're basically telling an anecdote to engage your audience. Let's look at a few more examples here before we move on. I want you to take a look at this one here. It's basically talking about Americans being easier to sell than Europeans. So, what about this one? Like, what do you think about this one? Is it a problem that you're describing? Is it an amazing fact that you're giving your audience, or are you telling them a personal anecdote? What do you think it is? Again, look not only at this, but also at this one here. You're describing a fact here. Americans are easier to sell to than Europeans. Is this a problem or is it an amazing fact? It's definitely not a story. So it is a problem. And again, look at the formulaic language here. You have, well, if I could show you what stops European from buys, if I could show you what happens to people who do this or blah, 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 would you be interested? And this is the hook that you're looking at in order to engage your audience. And the last one is this one here. This is actually quite an interesting one. And again, I'm not going to read the opener, but I would like you to analyze it very carefully. And again, look at the chunks of language here. Have you ever been in a situation where you stop right there, where, and then you describe the situation. And then, in order to engage your audience even more, you describe a time when something like that happened. And then you finally give them the result. This is a story technique. So we've looked at the problem technique, we've looked at examples of the amazing facts technique, and we've looked at examples of the personal story or anecdote technique. Now we're going to look at the language that you can use when you're using the problem technique. I'm going to be basically showing you some chunks of language, formulaic, ready, made, prepared, just for you to use when you are presenting. The first one is, suppose something happened, how would you react? How would you go about doing that? Second one is, again, very formulaic. Have you ever wondered why it is that, and then you describe, have you ever wondered why it is that Americans love French fries? You have. Well, if I could show you how much or how many kilos of French fries they eat a year, would you be interested? So again, by asking questions, you're not only engaging your audience, but also prompting them to participate in your presentation. Moving on to the amazing facts technique. Again, you can use phrases like, did you know that? And give them some amazing fact. Or you could say, and we looked at this one when we were doing the task according to a recent study. And you can describe what the fact, amazing fact is. You could also say statistics show that, and then, for example, you could say things like, statistics show that in the last 10 years, more people have legally immigrated to the United States than to the rest of the world put together. About 500,000 of them a year, in fact. Now, over 10 years, that's roughly equivalent to the population of Greece. Again, by saying that, you're engaging your audience, you're grabbing their attention, you're starting your presentation with a very powerful statement. And the last thing you could say is, I read somewhere the other day that, I don't know, the world's highest paid executive works for Disney, and he gets $230 million a year. Now that's about $2,000 a minute. That means he's currently making more money than Volkswagen. Yeah, that is really amazing. And finally, in terms of language, when you're trying to describe a story, or tell a story, I should say, or telling your audience an anecdote, here's the language that you could probably use. you know, let me describe something. When I think about music, I'm reminded of a time when I used to play in a band, and then you go on and describe that experience. Or the second thing you could say is, again, this is the same chunk that we've looked at during the exercise that we were doing earlier in the podcast. Have you ever been in a situation where, and then you describe the situation, and then you remember, I remember when, and then you describe here. Here is when you become very specific, and here you just give them your result, what happened in the end. As you can see, I still haven't mastered the pencil here on PowerPoint. Okay, so we're now reaching the last part of our podcast. I hope you guys have been watching and taking notes and hopefully learning a thing or two. The reason why I want to teach you a little bit about sound scripting, which I'm going to explain very shortly, is because as a presenter, the ability to pace your speech and use your voice to create impact is, in my opinion, the single most important skill you need. Believe me, you'll be far more effective if you are in control of your voice. So, what is sound scripting? Well, sound scripting is a technique that has been inspired by teleprompters, which are these things right here. It's basically a computer screen with words or text, and this lady right here is basically reading it, right? So that's a teleprompter. So it's basically this technique that has been inspired by teleprompters, and again, it was developed by Mark Powell in the book Presenting in English, which was introduced earlier in the podcast. And again, it doesn't require any sophisticated equipment beyond Microsoft Word, and even that isn't completely essential. It's basically divided into 3 steps, and we're going to go through these 3 steps together. The first one is what we call chunking. In order for you to give an effective presentation in English, you must learn to think and speak not in individual words, but in complete phrases. This means pausing in the right places. The ability to chunk your speech in a presentation may seem complicated at first, but it will quickly become quite natural. With practice, you will be amazed at how much clearer and more fluent you sound. Trust me, it works for me. A good way of getting into the habit of chunking is to actually write out parts of your presentation as you would present them and then read them out loud. Okay, so what we're going to do now is I'm going to ask you to open your laptop or computer or even your phone, and I'm going to ask you to basically copy this presentation extract onto your Microsoft Word or text word processor. Okay, this whole text here, I want you to type it up. Okay, I'll give you about 10 to 15 seconds to do that. And what I'm going to ask you to do, you can even pause the presentation, the podcast right now, and then play it after this. But I'm going to move forward. Okay, so once you've copied the presentation extract onto your Microsoft Word, what you're going to do next is to read the extract out loud. And even before you do that, try to record yourself. And the reason for that is because it's really important for you to do a before and after, so you see how effective sound scripting really is. So grab your phone, record yourself reading the extract aloud. Once you do that, or after you do that, I would like you to go back and decide in the text where you would pause for best effect. Again, one of the things that you can do is when you look at the sentence here, you could try to decide where you want to pause. You want to pause here? Do you want to pause right here? Do you want to pause here? I don't know if you've noticed, but in my answer, I decided to pause after drink. Again, because I find that longer chunks sound more fluent. But if you want to sound a little more emphatic, you would pause in shorter chunks. So you could say things like, the world's most popular drink is water. Do you like that? I don't. I find that it's more effective to say, the world's most popular drink is water. So my pause happens right here as I read this entire chunk here. Okay? So I want you to do this with the original presentation that you've copied into your Microsoft Word, and then you're going to compare your version with my original answer. And this is what my chunking of that presentation looks like. Again, your version may not look exactly like mine. It's really up to you to find the natural pauses that are used for emphasis and breathing in your presentation and clearly mark them. For example, right here when I said, I decided to pause after did you know? And again, after drink. And then basically the way I chunk this whole sentence is, but did you know that the world's second most popular drink is Coke? Again, the pauses depend on what you want to emphasize, but generally there shouldn't be more than 5 words to a line. As you can see right here, I decided to use less than 5 words. I only used 2 because I wanted to emphasize this kind of information, basically by saying it means that every week of every year, people drink enough Coke to fill the Shanghai Tower. After knowing where to pause, knowing which words to stress is the most important skill you need when you're presenting to an audience. So we're going to be working with the same script from the previous task, step 1, chunking. And again, you're going to be changing all the stress words into bold, and then you're going to capitalize the heavily stressed words. And again, before you do any of this, it's really important to identify the stressed words first. In that case, content words, adjectives, adverbs, verbs, and nouns. Remember that function words are often unstressed. Once you identify and bold all the stressed words, you can always capitalize the heavily stressed words, and that is basically the words with the primary stress. And I'm going to show you exactly what I mean by that. Okay, so this is what my answer looks like. As you can see, the first thing I did was to embolden the most important words, the stressed ones like world, popular, the word drink here, water. In shorter chunks, I usually emphasize the last word. And in this case here, intonation is going to rise. Again, in a longer sentence such as this one, it's a basic requirement of life on Earth. Again, my primary stress here is on Earth, right? So again, once you identify which words you're going to be stressing, which are basically the content words, the next thing you do is basically capitalize the words that are most important in the sentence. In this case, the primary stress. So, for example, in this sentence here, but did you know, so know is my primary stress here, okay? So basically I'm going to read this sentence right here with the primary and secondary stress, just so you guys have an idea of what it sounds like. But did you know that the world's second most popular drink is Coke? As you can see, second is the word that I'm emphasizing the most here, with popular, drink, and Coke in the next sentence. Also my primary here. Okay, so again, first thing you do, you chunk it, you find the pauses. The second thing you do, you find those stress words, the content words that you think you should stress out in your presentation, in your script, and then you capitalize the primary or the most important words in your sentence. In this case, perspective. And it's an interesting one here that I did in the last part of the sentence, of the script, I mean the presentation, was to capitalize the last words because I want to sound more emphatic. So it basically sounds like, it means that every week of every year, people drink enough Coke to fill the Shanghai Tower. Again, means, every week, and every year. All those words are going to be stressed. Okay, so once you're pausing and stressing effectively, it's time for you to start working on your voice and pacing. Again, varying your speed of speaking is one simple way of keeping an audience's interest. So the last step that we're going to be looking at is pacing. So let's take a look at how we can do that. So we're going to look at some sentences that I have here on the screen for you, and we're going to compare them in terms of pacing. In general, you should slow down to make your most important points. This gives your message time to sink in. So again, looking at this sentence right here, you could say bad management costs jobs. But if you want to pace yourself, you could say bad management costs jobs. Same thing happens with this one here. This is probably the single most important thing I've said. If you want to pace yourself when you're speaking and presenting, you could say, this is probably the single most important thing I've said. As you can see, when you slow down right here, you're actually emphasizing that this is a very important point. Again, by doing this, you're giving your audience some time to think about the message that you're trying to convey. Okay, so now, going back to the sound script we have been working on previously, what I'm going to ask you to do is to use your spacebar on your computer, on your laptop, to adjust the pacing of the script that we've been working on. So as you can see, I have spaced out the words I want to deliver slowly. Okay, so I'm going to give you some time to do that before you look at my final version. So a possible final version would look like this. Again, reviewing all those concepts of sound scripting. The first concept was stressing keywords. Again, the words that tell you what the sentence is about. Words like world, popular, drink, water, and so on. Those are the words that I emboldened. And also related to the same concept is to think about what you feel most strongly about. The idea is that there is normally just one word in a group of words that we feel most strongly about, and this one gets extra stress. So in the sentence, the world's most popular drink, I decided that drink is going to be the one that I feel most strongly about, and I show this by putting it into capitals. Same thing goes here. The world's second most popular drink. Again, I want to emphasize that it's number 2. It's the second, not the first. Again, I want to emphasize that this isn't a right or wrong type of exercise. It really depends on what you feel about your presentation and the meaning that you're trying to convey. You probably don't want to use capitals too much, because if you emphasize everything, then nothing is emphasized. One emphasis per sentence is plenty. Okay, just one per sentence. The second concept that we talked about was the idea of pausing and chunking your presentation or your script. Again, the idea is that when we speak, even when we are being fluent, we pause. And we do this to help out listeners understand what we are saying. Pauses give them time to understand the main points. Typically, we pause when we have said something particularly important or when we are about to say something important. A language chunk may be a new phrase for you, but the idea should be familiar. Certain words belong together, so we normally say them together, such as most popular drink. It wouldn't make any sense to chunk this. Again, one tip that I have for you is to try to read the same passage in different ways, sometimes putting more pauses or spaces in and sometimes fewer. Again, there is no right or wrong way here. If you want more fluency, pause less. If you want more emphasis, pause more. Right? And the last one is the third step that we looked at was the pace of your speech. Again, the idea is that good speakers do not speak everything at the same speed or pace, because that sounds boring. Pace is also part of the rhythm of speech and pronunciation. Sometimes there are words that we choose to say more slowly. Very often the words we give special importance to. And for this we use the space bar to show this. So instead of saying that every week, we would say that every week of every year, people drink enough Coke to fill the Shanghai Tower, right? And this is basically what your final version would look like. And ideally, your presentation would sound much better if you follow these three concepts. So to wrap up, sound scripting is an important technique that you should familiarize yourself with, especially because word stress and intonation within sentences is really important to correct English pronunciation. Sound scripting will help you become more expressive by taking sentence intonation skills to the next level. It should help you understand and improve two areas. One, the words you choose to stress in a sentence. And two, the rhythm of your speech, how and when you pause and chunk. When you are ready to finish your presentation, slow down and lower your voice. Look at the audience and deliver your final words slowly and clearly. Pause. Let your words hang in the air a moment longer. Smile and say thank you. I know the podcast wasn't as short as I promised, but I hope you enjoyed watching it and that you give sound scripting a go. And remember, there's a difference between spoken language and written language. So you want to practice this on texts that are spoken, not written. You could try some YouTube videos, or better yet, write your own. Find a spoken text and play with it. Mark it up with the sound scripting ideas I presented here. Thanks for watching.